Hey there, beautiful souls, and welcome to the pilot episode of Empowered You, the podcast where we talk all things healing, growth, and turning pain into power. I'm your host, Jill Ripley, and it's my intention to use my own personal experience to help you or someone you love open to the idea of letting go of past pain and using it as a springboard for personal growth. Much of what I'll share here is inspired by the journey I wrote about in my book, Empowered by the Storm, Releasing the Past and Embracing the Light. If anything I talk about today resonates with you, I invite you to check it out. It's available on Amazon or through my website, empoweredbythestorm.com. And just to give you a little context into why I may have something to offer, I wanted to share a bit about my history. Not to have you feel sorry for me, but to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. So if you'll indulge me for a few minutes while I give you a little recap of my past, it'll help you to understand why I've started this endeavor. So we're going to start with the story of my mother. She became pregnant at age 15, and her and my dad got married, and she became a mom at 16. My father was 6 years older than her, and they had their first child who died at just 5 months old due to crib death. Now, I imagine my mother suffered some terrible guilt due to the fact that my brother died when they were co-sleeping. He died of SIDS, crib death. And so my mother was grieving terribly. And my father asked my aunt, his sister, what he could do to help her feel better. And so she suggested that they try for another baby. So they did. And my brother, Jimmy, was born in September. And my brother David had died in December. So it was just 9 months later when my brother Jimmy was born. And then the following year, my brother Michael was born, and he was sickly. He had a lung disorder, so he was not in the best of health. And then I came along the year after that. And then the year after that, they found out that my father was terminally ill with brain cancer. So, as you can imagine, my mother, being so young, going through so much, she snapped. She couldn't take it anymore. And when I was just 2 years old, she left. Now, my father and my two brothers and I went to live with my grandmother, who was just an amazing, wonderful woman. And she's, to this day, she is my hero. I look up to her. She was just full of love. And she was a person who showed me unconditional love because no matter what I did, she loved me. Now, my father died the year after my mother left. And then the year after that, my brother Michael passed away. He was just 5 years old. So I was raised by my grieving grandmother. And I can only imagine at that point in her life, having gone through so much, she didn't have the strength to be very disciplinary like with me. So she was very lenient, but she was very loving. And there were still more traumas to come after that. At age 5, I was sexually molested by a neighbor. And at age 12, I was molested again by a close relative. As you can imagine, all this trauma led me to act out and do a lot of things that were disruptive. I was a troubled teen. I started smoking, drinking, doing drugs, skipping school. I was having sex with older men. I lost my virginity to a 21-year-old man when I was just 13 years old in the front seat of a car. So when my grandmother died when I was 14, my family felt that it was probably in my best interest to move me from the city of Lowell, Mass, where I grew up. I was sent to live with some distant relatives who lived on the Cape of Massachusetts, and it didn't work out. So I ended up in foster care. So as you can imagine, my early experiences of loss, abandonment, and confusion around my identity had a significant impact on my experience as a mother. So my story as a mother, I became a mom at age 17 while I was in foster care. Now, my foster mother tried to encourage me to give up my baby for adoption. I refused to give up my son due to my own abandonment trauma. I felt that I couldn't give up my son, knowing how terrible I always felt, wondering where my mother was in my life. But not having the appropriate role models, I struggled. Since my grandmother was so lenient and I got into so much trouble, I thought it was better to be a disciplinarian. I didn't want my kids going down the same road I had. I wanted nothing more than to be the best mother I could, and I thought I was doing okay. But looking back on things, there was so much I could have done differently. Now, I met the man who would later become my husband at age 21. We were so happy together, and he was such a great father to my son. We married when I was 27 years old, and we decided to add to our family. We had two beautiful daughters. At age 30, I had my daughter Jamie, and 2.5 years later, I had my daughter Jenner. But I suffered with postpartum depression with Jamie, and I also had prenatal and postpartum depression with my daughter Jenna. So I struggled a lot with emotional instability. After my youngest daughter was born, I decided to go on medication, which was helpful. I was on medication for about a year, and I slowly weaned myself off, and I got into a rhythm with life. And I thought I was doing okay, but my husband worked a lot, and I was alone a lot with the kids, and I was dependent on alcohol, and I was emotionally exhausted. We were both alcohol dependent, and I didn't have a lot of patience. I made my mistakes. I was a harsh disciplinarian. I yelled a lot, and I regret how I raised my children. I wished I had had more patience with them, and I wished I had given them more support when they were struggling with things. I also thought that we had a lot of fun too when they were little. I took them to places, I took them to play dates in parks and libraries, and we did a lot of trips, and we went to Point Sebago, and we did a lot of fun things. But there was always this background of tension, and I believe the biggest tension was our alcohol dependence. And I knew at one point that I needed to get sober. And I expressed to my husband that I needed to get sober, and would he consider quitting drinking with me? And at the time, he wasn't ready. I believe that in order to quit drinking, you have to have a strong reason why. And I knew I needed to get sober. So as you can imagine, with one person wanting to get sober, one not, we ended up in divorce. Now, it took me 2 years after our divorce to finally get sober, but I'm so grateful that I did. I discovered later in life that my dad was not my biological father, so that was another traumatic experience for me. And then sadly, I lost my daughter and my former husband in a tragic motorcycle accident. My daughter was just 19 years old at the time, and grief overcame me. And after that, my surviving daughter expressed to me that I was an abusive mother. And I would never discount her feelings because that was her perception. And it's not my right to tell her how she should feel. I can understand why she felt that way. I did a lot of things that I regret. My relationship with my daughter at this point is healing, and I feel that we're closer now. But I'm sure she has a lot of resentment to work through on her own due to my past behaviors. So today I wanted to start where my own personal journey began, with the mother wound. It's touched so many of us, whether we know it or not. This concept was first introduced by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Jung believed that there were a number of archetypes that governed human behavior. These are thought to be inherited patterns of behavior that begin in the collective unconscious and play out in the human experience. And the one I want to talk about today is the mother wound. Now, to clarify, this is not about blaming. It's about awareness and healing and the ability to forgive your mother for not being what you needed her to be for you and how you can reparent yourself. The mother wound isn't just personal, it's collective. It is the effect that arises from having a mother that was not what the typical mother is supposed to be like. Carl Jung's theory of the mother archetype is that a mother should be nurturing, protective, caring, and supportive. But many of us had mothers that were not like that at all. Some examples of unhealthy mothering include smothering or being overbearing, a mother that loves in a way that controls or doesn't allow the child to separate or develop independence, a mother that creates guilt when the child tries to grow or individuate. If you've ever heard a mother say, "After all I've done for you," this becomes a weapon to induce control in a child. And then there's the neglectful or absent parent who's either emotionally unavailable or physically absent. They don't see or attune to the child's emotional needs. So the child grows up feeling invisible, unworthy, or like their feelings just don't matter. There's the overcritical, perfectionist type of parent, someone who makes their child feel like nothing is ever good enough. Harsh judgment replaces encouragement, and love feels conditional on performance or behavior. And then there's the parent who has no boundaries. They're enmeshed with their child. They use the child for emotional support. They parentify the child. They confide too much in the child or expect the child to fill the role of a partner or therapist or best friend. This robs the child of a normal childhood and a sense of safety. And then there's also the self-sacrificing martyr type mother who constantly gives to others but ignores her own needs. And then they make the child feel guilty for her unhappiness or suffering. They use phrases like, "I gave up everything for you." And then there's the mother who uses victimhood or emotional manipulation. They use guilt or shame or passive aggressive tactics to get love or obedience. This puts the child in a position where they feel responsible for her emotions. And then there's also the narcissistic or emotionally exploitative parent. They use the child as an extension of their ego or image, and they only value the child when they reflect well on her. She'll dismiss the child's experiences, opinions, or pain. Now, the unhealed mother wound can show up as people pleasing, fear of abandonment, and struggle with boundaries, feeling unworthy. It can show up as perfectionism or chronic loneliness. These patterns are echoes of unmet childhood needs. We can't change the past, but we can choose to heal. The path is to become the mother we always needed for ourselves and to forgive ourselves for not being the mother we would like to have been for our own children. Without the proper guidance, it's understandable that one would not have the skill set to be the mother our children needed. And some of the ways that we can heal the mother wound are, first of all, to name the wound without shame. Don't minimize your pain. Try using a journal and use prompts like, "What did I need most from my mother that I didn't receive?" And answers may include things like, "I needed protection, but I felt unsafe," or "I needed to be seen, but I felt invisible." Witnessing is the beginning of healing. And it is your job to reparent your inner child. Imagine the mother you needed, someone who is kind, steady, and nurturing. Practice offering these things to yourself. Give yourself affirmations like, "I've got you. You're doing the best. It's okay to rest. You are loved. You are enough." Say these things to yourself. You can try saying them to yourself in a mirror. This is very important to learn to love yourself and give yourself the love that you needed as a child. Work with the mother archetype. Think about the nurturing mother symbols beyond your own personal mother. Think about examples like the Mother Mary, Mother Teresa, Gaia, or any other supportive feminine figure in your life. Visualize or write yourself letters from that loving mothering energy to yourself. Let yourself feel deeply loved. And witness the shadow without fear. Carl Jung said, what we don't make conscious, we repeat. So shadow emotions may rise like anger or grief or shame. Instead of judging yourself, respond with compassion. You say to yourself, I see you. It's okay to feel this. I'm here for you. And then build nourishing relationships with people who model love and support and presence. Find some feminine examples in your life of people who exude these type of traits in themselves and get connected with them. Be a part of community and connection and help rewire these old patterns. Healing the mother wound is not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about compassion and courage. You've heard my story, and maybe pieces of it echo in your own life or in the life of someone you love. Wherever you are on this journey, I want you to know that healing is possible. Growth is possible. Transformation is always available. You are not broken. You're becoming whole, and you're not alone. You're part of a generation doing the brave, tender work of turning pain into power. And every step you take, no matter how small, creates ripple effects for generations to come. Be gentle with yourself. Offer yourself the love you always deserved. You are both the one who needed more and the one who can now give more to yourself and to others. If this episode touched your heart, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need this message. And if you'd like to dive deeper into this kind of healing work, my book, Empowered by the Storm, is a great next step. You can find it on Amazon or at empoweredbythestorm.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay loving, and stay empowered. Thank you for listening.